As you all know, Credit Suisse is at the origin of a dramatic disaster, of a humanitarian catastrophe in Mozambique, and I'm quite astonished that almost no reaction of the political and judicial system in Switzerland can be observed. It's really a big issue, little media attention, and these few people who made something, like our friend Thomas Kessering, were attempts to intimidation. I sold attorney legal offices in London put pressure on him. Only a few NGOs took notice, I have the impression. Kontrapunkt, Akta, Solidaire, but the big are not really involved in this debate. Our party has made several parliamentary interventions, but no reports in media what the government said on it. And also when Thomas Kessering has intervened in two Credit Suisse shareholder meetings, it was only little media coverage. I didn't understand that. And we have a stony silence on the side of Credit Suisse, of course. They say nothing. And we have the Financial Market Authority, FINMA. Our government said 2 times when we make interpellations in Swiss Parliament, yes, they are making investigations, but that's all. We have no idea where they stand, what they are doing. I can just confirm, Mr. Siegfried, they are saying nothing. And it is a problem which is put in the law. Our parliament wrote in the FINMA law, they are not allowed to inform. And we have no reaction of the judicial system. There are a lot of crimes committed, but the judicial system doesn't act at all. And one of the few rays of light was SDC, which organized U4 study on corruption and state-backed debts in Mozambique. I do not know why you have not mentioned it, Mr. Siegfried, but this is really one of the single things which had been made, financed by Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Really very interesting study on the linkage between corruption, state-backed debts in Mozambique, and what can external actors, as we do. It's a very interesting study. But again, no media release, no official communication, nothing. It's very hidden somewhere on the web. You find it, but it's not active, never been actively communicated. So I have been asked why there is no coherence in foreign policy, why no debate on the SDC report. We can also ask. I think the story is quickly told. The Swiss government is an all-party government. From very, very, very right, they are actively fighting against human rights. They made the proposal within the government to get out of Human Rights Convention. To the left, 2 seats. We have no coalition treaty. There is even no political or institutional link between foreign and domestic policy. And I think Mr. Siegfried is right when he says, not very focused, but indirectly, it's a good thing when there is not a Turano link. When foreign policy, human rights, peace promotion, development promotion, sustainability, UN Agenda 2030 issues are put in a concurrence to domestic policy, then not human rights shall win, but domestic politics shall win. So it's better if it's a little bit separate. we have no prime minister. There is, every department makes what it wants, more or less. And we have an even growing scope for maneuver of departments. It's a really a big shift from Evelyn Wittmer-Schlumpf to Mr. Uli Maurer in finance department, which is competent for all these financial, international finance, tax, corruption and so issues. It's a big shift. But the same, more or less the same Federal Council. But there's really a big impact. And I think there is not a lack of administration procedure, not a lack of knowledge. All the arguments for human rights, against corruption, for development, they are on the table within the administration. But in the end, it is a question of power, and we have not the majority. So, Credit Suisse and Swiss government say, for Mozambique, everything is legal and okay. And Mr. Siegfried go one step further, and he said, we are now in a peace process with the real existing government of Mozambique, and we will go on with the peace process and don't not too much speak on corruption. We need these guys to go on with the peace process. So we have a complicity of Swiss banks and Swiss government with the corrupt elite in Mozambique, with which the profits are shared and which help to keep down the watchdogs in Switzerland and in Mozambique. But I think it's too simply to say the Parliament of Mozambique says everything is okay. This has happened in December 2016. They said everything is okay. It was not constitutional, it was against all laws, and then they said it was okay. But it is not okay if our government says everything is okay. It's just not true. So I am very happy to see that SDC, not G, SDC, is going on now to give a priority to good governance issues. It's a good shift, I think. And for me it is clear that there was no other opportunity but to stop general budget financing. Also, for me, SECO behavior was okay. What should they do? They must stop. However, and these are my points, it needs a compensation of the money we had economized, and we need a follow-up, and this is unethical. So, I have seven proposals, and this is my first point. We need a compensation through international cooperation. Switzerland made a big of economics to stop general budgeting financing, but it is not wholly compensated by grassroots development assistance in Mozambique. You have seen the figures of Mr. Siegfried. It was high like that and then came down, and it's not on the same level as it was before. And I think it needs a full compensation as the people in Mozambique is suffering. And we need a focus on international cooperation on fragile context, on empowerment of civil society, peace and conflict transformation, good governance, rule of law. I think SDC is going in the right direction to give more priority to these issues than to traditional cooperation assistance projects. And of course, we need more and not less financial means for international cooperation. This week, again, the Financial Committee of National Council has decided to cut again 100 million more from the budget for international cooperation. And this is the reality in Bern, and we are fighting for an issue which our government on the foreign policy level had approved again and again and again in the agenda, Addis Ababa agenda, in Agenda 2030 of UN, etc. Switzerland always gives the signature, yes, we support 2.7% GNP for international assistance, but we are far away from that. So I think this is the first consequence we should take. The second is, I think we must really focus on the odious debts issue. Odious debts is a concept which has been debated for 100 years now, and it is a concept which says if a bank gives credit and it has not looked at due diligence obligations, then it has not the right to ask this credit back. So it is not the population of Mozambique who should pay the 2 billion, but it is the duty of the corrupt elite and of the banks to look what they are doing with these odious debts. And in this report, STC has asked by this U4 agency institute, they give 3 or 4 arguments why it is odious debts. The due diligence procedures of CS was not respected. If you are reading the articles of our friend Thomas Kresselring, he has very clearly shown these criteria of Credit Suisse. They are reported in this famous Kroll report. That they have broken 3 or 4 criteria. They have given themselves, but in the end they gave the credit. Then the due diligence procedures also of IMF and the 22 other sponsors for the general budgeting have not been respected, and there are treaties against between IMF and the 22 sponsor states, and then second agreements between Switzerland and Mozambique, and there are rules and criteria. For instance, every big credit should be reported to IMF. This has never been done. Then the state guarantee has been given without parliament decision. The subsequent approval is null and void. It has not been decided in due time. And what I think is very important as well is the pretended purposes, fish or security, and the hidden purpose, security, both have never been materialized. There is no fish and there is no security, nothing. So these are odious debts, and I think our foreign policy should really keep this issue on the agenda of IMF. They have a whole division on the concept of odious debts and are doing quite a good work, but it needs the pressure from the member states to really insist in this issue. Then, third point, Swiss judicial system must act now. And I cannot understand why the public prosecutor doesn't make anything. Nothing. And there are a lot of legal bases to act. For instance, we have Article 158 in Swiss Criminal Code, criminal mismanagement. And CS has to be punished as it had, this is a quote, has been entrusted with the management of the property of another, and it breached his his duties and permits that other persons to sustain financial loss. So this is obvious, and it needs a legal action against Credit Suisse for this criminal mismanagement. Secondly, this is quite new in Swiss Criminal Code 102. We have now the possibility to look at the corporate criminal liability. So the old criminal thinking is that only a person, a natural person as you and me, can make delicts. And the new thinking is that also a corporation, an enterprise, a bank, can, as a bank, make criminal acts. And it is obvious that Credit Suisse failed to take all the reasonable organizational measures not to have these financing of briberies. Here, 322 ZTS is bribery, corruption. And third, Switzerland is member of the OECD Convention on Combating Bribery. And there again, there is a very clear liability of corporations and individuals if they are facilitating bribery. And this is also a sufficient legal base to act, and I cannot understand why our cantonal and federal public prosecutors are just doing nothing. For our bribery law is too weak. So it is only some years ago that Switzerland started to say that bribery between privates is criminal. Before it was allowed, and it could even be detected from the taxation. If you paid briberies, then this was a business cost, and you could write it in your tax declaration, and you take less taxes. So in the end, Swiss taxpayers paid for the briberies which banks and enterprises paid. So this is history, as I showed with the other slide. But what we still not have in this 322 ZTS Swiss Criminal Code, still it needs an individual or an enterprise who gives money to a state authority and the will that they are doing this and not the other. So it needs a direct link between the person who pays and the person who takes it. And this is not sufficient if you have a Credit Suisse and then a lot of intermediary firms, and in the end you have not the government but some ministers, and it's not very clear and so on. So this kind of bribery is normal. This is usual, but it is not taken by our laws. So we need a more explicit anti-bribery law from the failure to prevent model in UK, which is taking into account the facilitation of bribery. This is the point. Only then, fifth point, we need a register of beneficial ownership of companies. This is also discussed under the sentence, know your customer, or know your business partner. If you are if you have a Google system and you write there, know your business partner or your customer, you have 1,000 very interesting scientific and other reports on this question. It's a highly debated issue internationally, but not in Switzerland. They are doing nothing now. The problem is Credit Suisse has sold these credits to the public, and it was not clear who was behind the intermediary business partners who had been financed. And this is not due diligence. You must know who is your business partner and who is behind and who is in the end beneficial owner of the companies. Also, Kroll report, until now, he cannot say who really took the final 500 billions. We do not know. Any idea? So, it means if you have a business partner, you must know who is the beneficial owner in the end. And this should be public. And UK is much further. Here again, we had a G20 decision that we need worldwide register for beneficial ownership of companies. And UK started to do it, and we should follow this. And UK now create a new register for overseas companies. And the most important is that if they secure government contracts, they are in the competence of this law. And this, with this, we had no scandal with Mozambique. Then, since we need a reporting obligation of legal funds. Huh? This is now a big debate in the European Union. There was a first decision in this summer, and it seems that on December 5th December, also the ministers shall approve it, also under the pressure of the Paradise type discussion. You know, when you are reading the reports of Thomas, then you see there are a lot of small firms between. Some are here or there, one is based in Zurich, another is based elsewhere. These are small firms who are from morning to night, nothing doing but hiding for assets. They are creating offshore structures, legal entities here, legal entities there. The only purpose is to hide who is behind. European Union now says if a legal firm is creating such a structure, they have to report it within 5 days to the state authorities, and they have to show who is the beneficial owner of this structure. And I think that's exactly what we need also. Then we have criminals in Mozambique. Guebuza is a criminal. He has organized it with Ledo from Secret Service, has organized this whole structure where the 2 billion disappeared. They are big shots, big criminals. Nothing happens. Nothing. Mozambique, Parliament of Mozambique said, oh, everything is okay. General Attorney of Mozambique says, oh, I don't know. He doesn't make anything. So what we need is a legal base to act autonomously within Switzerland. If the legal system, the judicial system in the other country is dysfunctional. And we need the competence to freeze and restitute the stolen assets. They have been stolen from the people of Mozambique. They should be restituted. And we have a very good law, the Federal Act on the Freezing and Restitution of Illicit Assets, held by foreign politically exposed persons like Guebuza, etc. It came into force on 1st July 2016. It's a good thing. If you have a government to change which is profound enough to give legal assistance to the Swiss authorities. We have this case now in Tunisia. The Ben Ali assets have been freezed, and it starts now the process of restitution. But we had it not with Mr. Mubarak. Mr. Mubarak, also in Arab Spring, was put into jail. But then Mr. Sisi arrived, and he says, oh no, Mr. Mubarak, he's a gentleman. And now Switzerland started to give back to the criminal Mubarak his assets. Our legal understanding is we can only freeze and cut the property and take them.
Seize.
Seize. We can only seize. We can only seize if the partner state says, yes, this asset is illegal. But if the partner state says, like Mozambique, everything okay, then Swiss judicial says, the system says, everything okay. This can't be the point, and we need a change which allows, in these extreme cases, as we have now in Mozambique, that they can freeze, they can seize, and they can be restituted. And the restitution process is okay. It is regulated in this law, and there are procedures which give a guarantee that this restitution goes to the population and not to the old corrupt elite. So these are my 7 points. Just to give an idea, there are a lot of debates going on in Bern on the whole issues. We have a big debate on illicit financial flows now. We are asking for a national action plan. We have a big debate, of course, you know everything on the trade with minerals. It was SBU asked in 2012, this report. Then we had some recommendations, and we had progress reports, and so we are fighting for a new report, new recommendations. We have this whole base erosion and profit shifting debate of OECD. A lot of things are doing in Bern. We have this very important popular initiative on the responsibility of enterprises, who asks to introduce a legal liability in human rights violations and strengthen due diligence obligations. So you know this. This is the big picture, but we are very pessimist, as we have a hard right majority, especially in National Council. We arrive nothing from them, nothing. And I think we need a change in 2019 with the new elections. No, it's really hard. You have no majorities, nothing. All these issues.
We just kind of move to the panel. I mean, like a short break, and then. So, all right. So we have a question, round question. So, please, Thomas.
Yeah, as I'm identified now, I would like to make a remark and make some questions. I can confirm that NGOs were not interested in the case. When I, in April 16, realized that Credit Suisse is behind this scandal, which I have followed since 2013. The first email I wrote, the addressee was Professor Elisio Macano. Then I sent him also a postal letter with the book of our common friend, Severino Nguyen. I've never got any answer. The second email and telephone was public eye. Yeah, we know, but we have other priorities. Only half a year later, thanks to the fact that I am member in Actares and in Contrapunkt, they assumed. Mainly Contrapunkt, later on Actares. Yeah, but now I have a question. I was very sad that our friend Elisio Macano did not answer. 2 years before, I have telephoned him and said, let's cooperate, let's meet. And I said, I have to go to Tokyo and then to Berlin. This is private. Yeah, I understand. But then, I have also realized some publications of Professor Macano. In blogs, in Facebook, in interviews, he said he always defended the secret debts and criticized the critiques. Always. Recently, he said that the fact that without asking the parliament, the state guarantee was given is not a violation of the constitution. Who is violating constitution is Renamo. But in this case, there was no violation of the constitution. And in one of the last Africa bulletins, which is lacking here, it's the bulletin of February-March, I learned that to criticize the secret debts is, I say it in German, the citation in German, is realizing institutionalisierte Besserwisserei. This, or I try to circumscribe in English. This is criticized by people who, for institutional reasons, think that they know it better. But I'm not a Mozambican. Now I have a question. You are Mozambican, and you have several times alluded that behind the whole story there was good intentions. This morning already I tried to ask you, because you also said we should make an experiment to work with the hypothesis that maybe there were good intentions behind all these things. So I have two questions. The first question is, can you please explain what could have been the good intentions behind this thing? And the second question, this is a question to the Africa Committee in general. Don't you think that if we publish that what occurred in Mozambique was based in good intentions, don't you think that when we argue like that, we practice rain washing, clean washing of Credit Suisse? If we say that this was not really corrupt, I learned also from Privinvest and Palomar that there was no corruption, no money was disappeared, and so on and so on. No weapons, nothing at all. It was all in order. If we argue in this way, why should we criticize Credit Suisse? And this is my question also to Mr. Macamo and all. Yeah, I know you're a famous person here, and I'm very, very sad that our contact could not continue. But that's two questions. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Okay, I don't want to steal anyone's show, and it's your show. There are many things to say about this. First of all, I have serious problems with the emphasis which some people place on the notion of corruption and its relevance to understanding the challenges faced by countries. I basically think that's wrong. I don't think that it's useful at all. So we can have a discussion about that, but I don't think this is the right place to have that kind of discussion. Secondly, and this is also in response to the presentation, which I found a bit disturbing. It is that the presentation acknowledges that we are dealing with political processes, right? And it acknowledges that it's very difficult to have a policy here in Switzerland about certain things. But at the same time, it makes the assumption that what is the outcome of a political process here in Switzerland should not be object of a political process in Mozambique. So it becomes a technical thing. So it's about doing the right thing, right? And so there's no acknowledgement of the fact that in Mozambique that thing will also be the object of politics. I think that's, for me, it's particularly problematic, right? And then you have to add to that the fact that it's very nice and it's very easy also to sit here in Switzerland and say what should be done in another country, in this case in Mozambique. So how development policy should be. And of course the assumption is all that you need to have successful development is to have the right kind of policy. But of course, we know that the right kind of policy is not necessarily the solution to development issues. Things will happen as they happen, with any human activity. So the question for me is, you have an issue here that you have the power to tell someone what to do, but that person does not have the power to hold you to account for things that you asked him to do. And if you do not address that problem, you will always have an issue with development policy, which is the question I was asking earlier on with the earlier presentation. So what lessons do you learn from that? If your only lesson, the only lesson you learn is we have to do things better, but we can punish them for making mistakes, I think you have a problem, right? Okay, so about personal correspondence, we can talk about that. I just don't know what you're talking about. We are people who are entitled to have views on things, right? And however strongly any one of us thinks about a particular issue, it doesn't make you right. Right? You can have those feelings, and it's good. It's good for you, and so on. But you know, you're just expressing your opinions and feelings, and you should allow for the fact that other people will have a different view on these things. And I do happen to have a completely different understanding of the problems of Mozambique, and that has nothing to do with the fact that I am from Mozambique. It has to do with the fact that I approach those issues from a very particular perspective. One which is not moralistic, one which is not emotional, one which is simply concerned with understanding what is going on in Mozambique. And I try to do that with anything that I deal with from a scholarly point of view. Finally, yes, there was a discussion. In fact, that discussion was even with Carlos about the legality of this. And there were some lawyers in Mozambique who were saying that this was completely legal, and I was repeating that. And then when it turned out that it was not, I acknowledged that. No problem. I acknowledged, I said, oh, well, apparently this is not correct what I was saying, and that's fine. And really, for me, that's not even an issue. It's not an issue that should somehow force us to revise our ways of approaching what is an important. But, you know, today what we have been discussing is the complexity of the whole thing, and how childish it can be to reduce these things to individual persons. This is what we've been discussing all day today, with presentations that have shown us that we're dealing with complex issues, and that reducing these issues to simply some corrupt people that we think, you know, need to be punished and so on, that's not even helpful. Not helpful to the people who think that way, because to Mozambique it's definitely not helpful.
Can you please say what can be the good intention behind
I said this morning, you know, I do believe that there was a commitment on the part of the government of Mozambique to break free from the constraints of having to run the country within the framework of the structural adjustment program. You know, you have to acknowledge the fact that if you are running a country within a context within which you have to consult all the time with some international bureaucrats who have the right to tell you whether you can do what you want to do, and who always assume that what they think is the right thing is the right thing, of course you will be attracted to ways of doing things which are, you know, just outside of those frameworks, and you will even be encouraged to think that maybe those people don't mean well to your country, and that, you know, your idea is not wrong, it's just that you don't have the power to implement it. So that's fine with me. And by saying that, and I thought I had made that clear this morning, by saying that, I'm not saying that they are right. I'm just saying, you know, we should use that as an analytical tool to test our own narratives, to check whether our own narratives are correct or not. This is what reasonable people do when they want to think properly.
Yes, I want to say something from the Swiss part. I don't agree completely. I agree with certain points you put in your account, but I don't agree. Credit Suisse is a Swiss bank, and we are Swiss. And when the Swiss bank does not follow the rules, actually, we thought they have to follow in giving credits, then I'm allowed to intervene, to make if it would be Mozambique, or it would be, I don't know, Costa Rica, or I don't know what. And we have, of course, engaged because we know Mozambique, and it was for us that the Swiss part starts to have the correct behavior politically, legally, and morally as well. I think also the Swiss banks have a certain obligation towards the global society, or whatsoever you say, even more to the countries who are less developed. Yes, and as you say, the issue is so complex. On the other side, I lived 10 years in Mozambique. You know, if it's unfortunately on all the world like that. The one who just are looking for profit and getting richer, they have a very simple goal. Yeah, and they find their colleagues and their complices and they follow this goal, and they get very complex instruments then to get that hidden. That is maybe the complexity what they see in this case.
Yes, my question is actually to the presenter. You presented Swiss politics somehow as a fight between SP and the rest.
No.
SP has...
There are a lot of coalition partners, of course.
Yes, but SP somehow seems to have a clear opinion of where to go to.
We have our demands, and
I got the impression
there are others which are very, very nice and has to debate it also, of course.
My impression was that within SP very different standpoints, and the one presented to us is not always the one that is prevailing then in national political discussion. So perhaps you could also say a word about your position within SP and the attempts to lobby your colleagues and how successful you are in these internal policies.
Well, all these demands are issues of parliamentary interventions, and I'm working for the socialist group in Swiss Parliament. I'm responsible for foreign affairs and security issues, and I am advising them. And just last night we had a big meeting to debate, and all these issues are part of parliamentary interventions. So these demands reflect what we are doing in Swiss Parliament. Not more and not less. Of course, there are other parties who are doing things which are very nice, others are less nice, and there are a lot of coalition partners and so. But I have been invited to present what we are doing, and I ignore more or less what all the others are doing. But here I'm very good informed, as usually I'm writing the parliamentary interventions for our members in the parliament.
I'm very sorry I have to proceed to the panel. So thank Peter for his presentation and his contributions.
So since you are behind time already, there won't be a break.
Yeah.
You can sneak out for coffee or for the room, but please generally stay in the room. I'm asking all the speakers of this morning and afternoon to come to the podium, including Barbara, in addition for the Swiss ADR, and then we'll start the final roundtable or panel for probably half an hour. Just